Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me just note that I think that the premise that we're operating on in this hearing is just wrong. I think it started right with Mr. Grayson, whose opinions I deeply respect but disagree with, when he said that this is all about air pollution. And CO2, it's about CO2, it's not about air pollution. Pollution, by the definition of not most, but many very prominent scientists, is something that endangers human life, endangers the health of human beings. What we have here, and the hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars that we're talking about, is all based on the idea that CO2 is heating our planet. And this theory, which we have to all understand, pushing this theory, this administration, is basically by putting such an emphasis on it, being willing to sign agreements that put enormous power in the hands of global decision makers instead of just American decision makers, as well as have a tremendous impact on jobs, especially in the coal industry, where we're talking about tens of thousands of jobs that are being lost. I mean, I'm very happy to hear we're trying to do something to help them come through a crisis when men and women who have earned a living and supported their families, all of them, are now just being thrown out because of a theory. And I say the theory because there are hundreds of scientists who do not believe that the global warming theory based on CO2 that is heating our planet is correct, whether it's Dr. Freeman Dyson of Cornell or William Happer of Princeton. Those are just two of hundreds of scientists who just disagree. And it seems to me what we've got here, when we're talking about the money that's being spent and the forcibly shifting a reliance from coal to natural gas and to wind and solar, et cetera, is running roughshod, basically, over the livelihood and the well-being of many American working people. And you're not the one to ask to explain global warming, the global warming theory, but when we're talking about CO2 reduction, what are the other benefits that you can see that justify this enormous expense and this enormous, dislocation of our economy in order to accomplish these goals? Is there anything else but, when you say air pollution, I don't accept the fact that CO2 in any way causes human health problems. And air pollution, to me, is worth trying to do some things to try to protect health. There's no doubt about that, but trying to basically fulfill this or base our operations on the CO2 theory of global warming, I don't believe is justified. Maybe you can tell us what else beside global warming is being benefited by these expensive and dramatic changes that you're involved in.
Well, thank you very much, Congressman, for the question. So there's a lot there, clearly in that question. So maybe I'll refer back to COP21, the global climate event late last year. Went into COP21 with the expectation that maybe 60, maybe 70, maybe 50 countries would put forth INDCs, their initial nationally determined contributions, real steps that countries are going to take in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. With U.S. leadership, we ended up with 190 countries, essentially all the participating countries, made specific commitments to address climate change, to address anthropogenic CO2. A remarkable outcome. I mean, it's remarkable to get 190 countries to agree to anything, much less something as difficult to address as this. as fundamental as it is to our ideas around energy security, and indeed something that you actually have to take steps to address. 190 countries, led by the United States. And so in terms of an emerging consensus, I mean, there's an emerged scientific consensus around this existential need to address carbon pollution
So
around
it's all
CO2.
based on the CO2 theory then, what you're talking, when I say if there's other things and you're talking about CO2, let me ask you, does CO2, is there an indication? I just visited some hothouses where they're growing different vegetables and plants,
Right.
and I noted that they were pumping CO2 into these hothouses to grow plants that would have a greater production of food.
Right.
Even here in our own country, we do that. If we are reducing the CO2 in the atmosphere, is that also going to result in a lower production of food?
So,
I mean, all these people have a consensus about air pollution.
Right.
Is there a side impact as well, beside the dislocation of people's jobs, that there'd be less food produced in the world?
we're looking at beneficial uses of CO2 that include taking CO2 for algae production. So there are useful things that you can do with CO2, and that's been part of our program. It's been part of the EERE's program that looks at renewable energy. So there certainly are beneficial uses of anthropogenic CO2, but overall there is an enormous challenge of reducing greenhouse gas emissions so that we can get the climate to sustainable levels. That's the core of our program. That's the reason why we're working on this.
Honest
on this
people
effort.
can disagree with that, so thank you.
Right. And I did want to address this idea of forcibly shifting from coal, right? And I've spent a lot of time in coal-producing countries. I've spent some time with the governor in West Virginia. We have a laboratory that's based in Morgantown, West Virginia, National Energy Technology Laboratory. Coal countries are under tremendous pressures, but there are market forces which are impacting coal. You have trillions and trillions of cubic feet of natural gas that are available and at commercial quantities that were not available years ago. And that reduction in the price of natural gas has put a tremendous pressure on coal, that along with the need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So I'd say that the program, our efforts within the Office of Natural Gas, within the Office of Fossil Energy, are to ensure that all forms of energy remain relevant.
Yeah, we do need to move on, Mr. Smith. So I appreciate that. Chair